International Cannabis Business Conference 2024 Berlin, brought to you by the Tallman Group and various other people. We're good to be here. We're going to discuss developing effective medical cannabis products, which is always good. Apparently, the later part of the day is the medical part of the day, which is good. How are you, Doug? Good to see you. Fantastic. How are you? What are you doing? No, you can. Yes, of course. To lead us, the CEO and founder of Keenlock Naturals Ltd., and also he's very good at opening water bottles, as you can see. He's very dexterous. That's fantastic. And you carry them all. Wow. Let's hear it for Dwayne Stewart.
Come on down one more.
I got one for you.
Here we got a spot here.
Oh, anybody?
There we go.
All right. You're good? Everybody's good? Yep. Fantastic.
Good afternoon, Germany. Thanks for having us here today. Congratulations on your quasi-legalization, not legalization. It's going to be a bumpy ride for you all. Coming from Canada, we've watched the industry explode and implode and come back a little bit. So we're going to talk a little bit today about the foundation of cannabis, really, which I think is medical. I think that the medical products that we're going to talk about today are a big part of what has driven the history of the prohibition of cannabis and then the reemergence over the years. So my name is Dwayne, and we run a product company that does terpenes, Keenlock Naturals, and we also focus on medical products through our wellness brand. And in 2022, we won the World CBD Awards for the best CBD edible, and we did that because we wanted to put up our products against the world and made sure they were good. And here at ICBC, I'm excited to announce that we've just completed a landmark observational study with Zentrilla, showcasing the difference between our product, a CBD gummy with 50 milligrams of CBD in it, versus a capsule with 50 milligrams of CBD in it. And we found that we had over 300% more efficacy and over 500% more efficacy with women. And it's those kinds of studies that have driven the interest in this panel here today. And we want to talk a little bit about where we've come from, why we do it, what everything's all about. So to the panel members, take a moment and introduce yourself and tell me, what is the thing that you go to munch on when you consume?
When you consume. When I ever consumed, but in general, I have a munch on chocolate, but that's a known thing for me. They always say it's something for women, but in your study, but there's the difference between male and female, you know, that sometimes fades, especially with me, when it's about chocolate.
Charlie, you've been in the industry forever. Tell us what you do at Bedrocan.
Sorry?
Tell us what you do at Bedrocan.
Oh, so many things. What we actually do is making basically a raw pharmaceutical material in five distinct varieties that are genetically stable, that are chemically stable, and that can be used to make products out of it. We don't do that ourselves. We cooperate with industry partners here in Europe, and we have a strict pharmaceutical focus in that. So basically, that's what we do, and that's where we are coming from, and what we have been doing for now almost 20 years in this way. Yeah.
And when did you start at Cannabis?
That's a long time ago, 32 years.
32 years, the real pioneer here. Yeah. I want to make sure everybody knows that. Michael, how are you today? What need did you first see in the marketplace that inspired you to do what you do?
So I can't hold a candle to that, to 32 years. I've been in cannabis for only about 6 years. I was in senior government for a long time before that, and probably should have used more cannabis then when I was in there. My company, Remedos, in Canada, we make the equivalent to an asthma inhaler. And what I saw was a need for a device that was not only accurate, but acted really quickly. And it has purified THC, or we can customize the product in there. And it works really, really well. The challenge with it is fitting that niche that we saw of having something that could work really quickly, gold standard being smoke, and also have an accurate dosing, which people want.
Yeah, awesome. And what's your go-to munchie?
Sorry?
What's your go-to munchie when you consume? Everybody's got to get the munchies.
Yeah, I kind of sleep through those, I think.
Use the night, fair enough. Kevin from Abstract, how are you doing today?
Great.
I saw the booth. You guys looked active. It smelled great. One of the better smelling booths.
Thank you.
All right, everybody should go visit the outside booth. So what role do you think technology plays in differentiating product offerings in such a competitive cannabis market?
Yeah, I gotta tip my hat to Marcus. He kind of did a good bang-up job for me. But we invested heavily into analytics, and that's what Marcus was showing there. We were able to invest in analytics. It came out to be like 100 to 1,000 times more powerful than your regular QC instrumentation that you see in the States today. And that enables us to do discovery into the plant, and that enables us to see like 500 different compounds in each sample. And then when we do that discovery, it enables us to answer a lot of questions like what happens when it sits on the shelf, what makes cannabis gassy, what makes it exotic. And when we answer those questions, we're able to create IP. And by extension, it enables us to be an R&D partner and an innovation partner to our customers. And that enables us to, in turn, make better products.
And do you find that terpenes are playing a driving role even in products that are meant to be single cannabinoids?
Well, the terpenes is kind of like a colloquial term, right? It's really, once you dig in there, it's a lot more than just terpenes. You got the thiols and the indols and the esters and everything else under the sun in there. And I think it's just a term to describe the experience, the flavor and aroma of cannabis. What do you taste when you are experiencing that product?
Awesome. Brinder, at the end there, how are you?
Excellent. It's always good to be at the tail end and wake everybody up here. How's everyone feeling? Good? There you go. Come on.
Brinder, you guys are very research focused. Your company produces CBD for inputs around the world. Tell us a little bit more about the clinical trials that you do as a prerequisite to product release. Is that an important part of the development?
I think you got to think about the pathway of the product. Is it a prerequisite for all products, clinical trials? No, because you have a pathway of medical products that don't need clinical trials, but there are limitations. So if you're looking at dosing levels and giving confidence to physicians, you do need the clinical backing. And if you want to go through a clinical program, you do have to have clinical background. If you're looking at acute pain versus chronic pain, faster onset versus slow set. So depending on the product form, depending on medical versus pharmaceutical drug, no. So the medical pathway, no, you don't need clinical trials for that. But if you want RS drugs, if we want more champions in the medical community, GPs, pharmaceutical industry to get involved, then yes, it is paramount importantly to have clinical backing.
And do you think that observational studies have a place in that process? Did they carry enough weight behind them for the pharmaceutical and medical market versus pure clinical phase 1, phase 2 trials?
If we want to attract the pharmaceutical industry, then we've got to do the full gamut. And I think sometimes within this industry, I think there's some myths and false assumptions that just because it's a natural plant-based substance that regulators are going to take a bit of a break or a faster pathway. And that's not true because, if you want to follow the biotech and pharma pathways, it's written in law and regulation, and you have to do the full gamut to get there.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to jump in here. I totally agree with what you say. However, I do think cannabis is a very specific product, and it's a natural plant. And everybody's talking about cannabinoids as being the main component, and that needs to be researched properly. I know that doctors and scientists are doing that quite a lot. I think, however, that the value lies in the whole plant. I think that the value lies in standardization of a whole plant, have specific, very specific chemical varieties that you can actually research, and that is consistent for the next time when the researcher comes back and has to do other research, but with the same product. So making that possible and working towards products. In the pharmaceutical industry, they have to take one hoop, meaning they have to go off the single compound theory, single target, single compound theory, and they have to accept a whole plant, but a standardized whole plant. as a way to go. I think if we can achieve that, then cannabis will get to the right place where it belongs. Cannabis is not only THC. If it was that, then products would already have been long into the market. But the research should focus on whole plant product, to my mind.
And I'll add that there's many pathways, and I agree. Cannabinoid research and isolating is just a pathway we've chosen to get there, and following what regulators want to see. If you look at the market authorization drugs, it's all from isolated products. But I agree, this is what needs to be done. More innovation, the more we study the whole plant, the more products will be out there. This is just a pathway that we've chosen.
It's amazing watching the cannabis pioneer fight the political activist at the end there, or maybe not activist, was, you've got a lot of politics in your background. And it's interesting, your comment about if we want to attract pharma. Well, do we? I mean, do we want to attract patients? And I think that's part of the challenge of...
If we look at the world of patients, I think currently, if you see at a global level, it's about 10% of the doctors that are willing to prescribe. 90% is not yet there and needs clinical research. And I agree, we need to do clinical research on every level. But that 90% of people that we cannot reach, that can profit from cannabis as a medicine, that is the 90% you have to reach through a pharmaceutical approach. And I couldn't agree more to that than that.
Well, let's talk about, this is a good segue into safety. Let's talk a little bit about safety. What role does safety and quality control play in the product development that your company does, and how do you support safety? And Michael, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so a product like ours, Dwayne, the QA and the QC on it's built like a drug product. We follow the international ICH guidelines for how you'd make a medical device like an inhaler. So it's tested all the way through, front end, back end. So we make the product to GMP criteria simply because it's going to evolve that way. Even though in Canada the way the licensing works is a little bit different, globally it's going to be a GMP product. So it's going to be a cannabis medicine. We just had a great talk earlier on the confusion of how every country sets up their own rules and regulations. The closer we can get to those standards, those GMP standards, it's going to be easier for everybody to understand the product and for it to move around.
Fair enough. Kevin, what do you think?
Yeah, someone said something earlier where when you enter the industry, or when the industry starts up, the barriers to entry are usually lower, and as it progresses and matures, those barriers get much higher. And in California, QA and QC are huge, and those things are starting to be adapted, especially they're already adapted by a majority of the Canadian LPs, and the US companies are catching up to that. But further on that, you have the regulatory packets that you have to be completely ready for. I'm sure you know all about that. And then also toxicology is a big one that's getting a whole lot of investment now. And when you start off in the industry, ISO might cut it, but not anymore. You have to go to SQF 1, 2, 3, GMP, and you have to go through the whole gamut now.
Brinder?
Sure, I think safety is paramount to give consumers, patients confidence that the products they're consuming are safe and reliable. And the stigma still exists in this industry, as we all know, and industry hasn't helped itself where they put products out there that has a lot of banned substance in it. But the approach we've taken to assist safety, I think it starts with your manufacturing, as been mentioned, your toxicology, and also the safety profiles are two things that were paramount when we look at novel foods in Europe that they want to see. And one of the things that we done as a company, to your question, Dwayne, was we provided our own data when we did our applications rather than relying on third-party data. So all the data in our submissions is from our own manufacturing, our own molecules, to put that forward in our facility. And I think that is paramount if we want to build confidence amongst consumers and patients and attract more people.
Bedrocan was the first company that became GMP licensed back in very early 2017. I think that GMP should go to the level of cultivation. That's where it all starts. Actually, the Dutch government went with us in the beginning, saying, we include cultivation the way you do it as part of your GMP license. Later on, they said, nah, difficult, cannot be. It should be GACP anyway, it's not possible. However, what we have been doing as a company is we implemented GMP in our GACP manuals, and made it GMCCP, as we call it.
You're making up your own acronyms. I love it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, no, at Flow Scientific, our terpene company, we constantly are being asked to include new molecules, in different formulations, and we revert to the best available safety data, and provide or don't provide them, and then we get complaints. Well, your product's more expensive. We're like, yeah, it's not being cut with questionable products, which we've seen from some providers, and often it's the effect of the marketplace, especially on the rec side, or the adult use, trying to push the boundaries and gain market share. And on the medical side, fortunately, I don't see that happening. Do you think that rec pushes medical?
The other way around, I would say. It's a bit of a shame to me. I would say that rec should be rec, and medical should be medical. And the overlap between the two, it's a kind of a little bit heartbreaking, especially when I'm trying to convince doctors. We as a company are trying to convince doctors that you can use cannabis the right way for patients. And then the doctor is pointing to the medical world or to the recreational world and say, look what's happening there. And they are looking to what is happening in Germany right now. There's some sort of a gray overlap between medical and recreational. And doctors, they shift away from it. They don't want to be don't want to be there, and don't want to be mentioned that way. So again, I think it's fair enough to say, recreational world, create your own world. I'm fine with that, no problem on that side, but don't mingle with the world of patients to that regard. There is a too big group that is in need of cannabis for many ways.
Don't tell Health Canada that.
I know.
Yeah, I think the medical and rec are very different. Like from my experience in Canada, when rec came in, we had hundreds of thousands of patients with medical documents, and it plummeted. And what we see is, when I used to be involved in executive side in healthcare, until you convince the person that holds the pen, that's writing the script, you need to have the quality to tie all this together between the QC, the QA, the label. We didn't talk about the label. Like on the medical side, the label's so important because when a doctor writes a script, they don't question the label. They assume it's right. And they live in a world where if the cancer drug says X, they assume that's right. And we need to get to that standard on the medical side. And then the clinical and observational, you asked a question on, I think observational work is so important, and we have such an interesting opportunity because cannabis itself has notice of compliance, to use a pharma term, and it's in the industry in Canada, several places in the United States, and now coming into Europe. We can do observational work that you can't do with an API on the drug side, where you have to go through quality, safety, pharm tox, and everything. So it'll come down to how smart we can be in this room about asking the right questions on the observational work, convincing the white coats in our world this does work, and I think they're almost there. Rec is going to create amazing opportunities and amazing challenges at the same time, because our physicians will, Michael, go across the street and just go pick it out yourself. I don't want to carry the liability. So I think we're going to learn a lot as we go rapidly through this, from decriminalizing and bringing in this amazing oil that can help so many people.
Bridger, I didn't want to forget to have you pitch your keynote tomorrow. What are you going to be talking about tomorrow morning?
Tomorrow morning, we're talking about advancing the cannabinoid scientific landscape. What are the challenges? What's the course? What are the rewards? What's on the horizon in terms of innovation that's happening within the industry? And I've been told by the organizers it's going to be the highlight of the conference. So it's a must attend, 10 a.m. tomorrow.
Brought your own fluffers, did you?
I was just passing on information I've been told, Dwayne.
Perfect. Speaking the truth at the end of the panel there. Kevin, terpenes and flavors and esters and ethols, as you pointed out, are always making waves in product development in North America. I'm certainly seeing that in Canada as being one of the key differentiators of how products are made to appear different from their competitive products. What future trends do you foresee in cannabis product design over the next few years?
Well, specifically in Germany, we'll see how the medical market develops here. I'm specifically very interested in seeing how that develops and how the recreational market develops, and if there is going to be a divergent between the medical and the recreational, or if it's just going to gray together essentially into like people releasing the same product in both markets. And that's what we see in California. And you know, you see every product under the sun is what it seems like when you walk into a California dispensary. And I'm wondering if that's the same thing that's going to happen here in Germany. And so that's, you know, it's a lot of speculation in that question.
Yeah, it seems in phase one that we're not going to even see the ability to sell or buy cannabis here in Germany. That's going to be phase two or pillar two, as I've heard this weekend. But in Canada, you know, we've certainly blended that. You know, your comment, Michael, about it, you can just go across the street and pick it out yourself. The challenge with that process, at least in Canada, has been that the arbiter of what's available in rec is individual people that are part of the monopolies that actually control distribution, meaning the provincial governments. And I hope that doesn't happen here for Germany. It'd be the main thing I'd recommend they do not do. But as far as the ability for medical to access greater product selection that are actually effective, I think medical does a better job of that. That we can have the opportunity to produce products that hit a very specific outcome, you know, whether it's in female health, whether it's in relaxation stress or, you know, pain control. You know, Charlie, how do you think that's going to be unfolded here in Germany?
It's very difficult to predict how things are going to look like. What I do know, however, is that if people want to use cannabis for a specific purpose in their health, most of those people like to stick to the brand or to the product that they get. I see a problem in recreational type of production that, especially when it comes to flower or flower product, that it will be difficult to maintain those products for a longer time in the market because they will be replaced by other types and other things, and then it will be difficult for that specific group to find and to stick to a product that is always there. And of course, when you start working product into other products, and it might become a little bit better. But again, flour is still one of the biggest products in the market and is there to stay.
Even in Canada, with a wide selection of product formats, you know, edibles, topicals, you know, vapes, etc., cannabis flower is still, you know, 70% of the market, and then pre-rolls are another, you know, 20% of the market. So, you know, there's 10 or 15% of the market that's being used by non-flower. You know, I'm putting pre-roll into that flower category. You know, and one of the things that you've done over the years, you know, Choling, is if you've had to move your business around to support regulatory changes, you know, how do regulations affect where you operate?
Very much. Regulatory compliance is actually one of the first commitments we have in our company. So we have been bound to the Netherlands for a long time. We have been in Canada when the rules were changing in Canada. We have been there for a bit. But when we saw the mix of recreational and medical arise again in Canada, things started to become difficult for us, let me put it that way. In Europe, we see a change now. There are more countries coming online with regulatory-friendly environments for production, and actually it's the reason why we are moving to Denmark as we speak. Plans are moving this month, so we hope to be online in Denmark by the end of this year. And to have more regulatory freedom, so to speak. We see it's a patchwork in Europe still of regulations, and yeah, we have to adapt to that patchwork kind of.
Well, right now, with medical market in Germany, really being driven by that PrEP, I'm saying that right, the pharmacy distribution, you know, and that really impacting the product designs that we can put into the market. You know, Michael, how has that really impacted your product design concepts?
A product like ours will be a medical device, as I understand it, in Germany. So it'll be treated like a drug. Countries in Europe, Portugal, United Kingdom, are a little bit different. There's regulations around cannabis medicine or integrated devices. I think as it harmonizes, Dwayne, it'll come together and it'll be a GMP level product. So to the comments that were just made on the quality assurance and the label, and that's going to be critical. And then the regulatory aspect of a product like ours, it's going to be highly regulated simply because it's a device, and then the quality of the API that goes in. Germany's got a really great opportunity here from watching and learning from Canada and the United States. And I think the regulations will probably be great on the QA, QC side. Quality of the product will be great. It's going to be access to market. And
Germany likes its rules.
Well, I think the quality of the product's going to be very high. We're going to see 60, 70% flower as it evolves, and then there's going to be other products come in.
Did you see the regulation on the screen where the flower could only have 10% THC? Was that an age gate thing, or was that meant to be across the board?
Oh, I don't know.
Age? Okay, all right. Phew. Because 27% cannabis in Canada is like, oh, is it that low? So I'm glad. I don't think that's going to happen here. So on the medical side, as we develop products for medical, how do you find your motivation and the reward and results of focusing on medical versus rec? How does that impact your products? And Burinder, maybe we start with you on that.
Yeah, we're focused on the medical pharma side, and don't do anything on the rec side. But we're guided by the evidence and science. So we look at cannabinoids and see how they work in the body, how they work with the receptors. We follow the science. We work with researchers around the world. Currently, we're in 30 clinical studies globally that are utilizing our active pharmaceutical ingredients. So we're guided by the evidence. We're guided by the science. We're guided by what the researchers like the Welsh paper say on what these cannabinoids can do, and we feel it's important to isolate them, to study them, and then figure out how they work individually and how they work in combination, and then put that through clinical research. We're developing new chemical entities also, doing our research, but we're driven by the science, we're driven by the data in terms of our approach.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Driven by science, we just opened up our own clinical research unit in the Netherlands, getting to a level of scientific results that we are aiming for with our own products, with our own flower, basically, and getting those results out there, getting basically getting the thumbs up from the medical world on the way we approach it is for us very rewarding. Yeah.
In addition to the science part of it, I've learned so much from the sales data on the medical side. I got into this thinking kind of naively that an inhaler like we were making would be great for people that are naive to cannabis. And what the sales data is showing us in Canada is people that smoke a lot of cannabis are picking up an inhaler. And they're doing it because of anti-smoking laws that are everywhere. So, most people that consume medical cannabis globally are smoking it because that's the primary format that we've had for years and years. So I think as it evolves, it's going to be a very interesting product to see how people evolve and continue to smoke because that's the way they've taken it. We know in medical systems, when you ask a patient to stop smoking, they don't. And that, I'm not trying to shame anybody about that. It's the way they consume their medicine. And we're going to see better products come along to help them keep their THC levels appropriate and manage their indication.
Kevin, do you find that your consumer, your clients are coming to you with consumer-based demand? Like, are you seeing that the demand for product development come from the level of the consumer?
Yes, more or less. It was interesting how you said how you're following the science and it's very objective, whereas when we're developing products for consumer-focused, right, we're developing it for our clients or is doing it for the consumer. Our science is a bit squishier as, it depends on the consumer's experience. And my experience of cherries is morally different than your experience of cherries. And so when we analyze something, we analyze it to the nth degree, as many compounds we possibly can. And then we take this huge sensory panel of many people to say, like, well, how does that smell and taste to you? What is that experience to you? And then trying to combine these databases together to create this robot that can predict how something might be later. And we're using that to develop these products at a larger scale for more people, essentially, to make more custom products for these consumers in the marketplace.
We certainly experience at Kinloch Wellness consumers coming to us, and expressing joy with a given product, and that really helps us, direct, where we're going to go next. And certainly the sales data is a big indicator of that. And we've had products that have failed, products that we think they're great, but the consumer's like meh, and in a busy marketplace, meh doesn't cut it. It's got to be spectacular one way or the other.
Wayne, can I just quickly add too on that thing? I think think about products too. You got to think about innovation evolution too, in terms of advanced delivery systems, finished dosage forms, how we enhancing bioavailability, solubility, the stability on this product, and viability is a key one. So I think that is going to be key too, and I think targeted delivery systems is also going to be key too as we move. So innovation is also going to push too in terms of developing products.
I think it's time for questions.
Time for questions already? Let's hear it from the panel. Who has a question? Okay, there's one right there. I was going to say you were wrong. It is clearly not time for questions, and yet you were right.
I was watching the clock, man. I'm doing my job.
You're doing a good job.
Hello. We come from Morocco, and we are new to the medical legalization of cannabis. And what we see is this, the medical position is to go to the molecule while the world is looking for the flower. And we just don't understand this schizophrenia between the consumer that came to cannabis and heard about cannabis and 1,000 years of reputation, and medicine is coming to it because of the flower, and now we are breaking it to molecules. And we just don't know how to navigate to this, because we are going to extraction, and the further we go into extraction and the further we go from the origin. And we don't know whether it's the molecule or it's the full spectrum that is needed. And in that case, if it's the full spectrum, why an oil full spectrum wouldn't be a medicine, and why a flower wouldn't be a medicine? And since we are investing, every day we get, it's getting foggier and foggier. So,
welcome to cannabis.
The more we study, the less we understand.
Welcome to cannabis, or is that welcome to like corporate science?
Welcome to the regulation of cannabis.
If I may. What actually happened to cannabis in general, people found out that cannabis has its medical value. And then all of a sudden we have to push it into a system that we call medicines. Yeah. And people don't understand it. And we had lots of discussions in our company as well, where we actually say the horse has always been behind the cart. You need to do your research first before you bring a pharmaceutical product to the market. And guess what? Cannabis is there for 60, 70, 80, 100 years, thousands years, already in a market where it's basically a traditional medicine to that regard. However, there's a very important thing to cannabis, because cannabis is not cannabis always the same. You have those different products with different molecules, and then we're coming to the terpenes, to the cannabinoids, to everything together there. So the option of picking out one molecule is for a doctor and a pharmacist the most ideal option. It's for them the best way to work. However, history has shown that whole plant, in many cases, works better. But not this specific whole plant, but that whole plant. So what makes that difference? This is where standardization, the chemical standardization of your plant matter comes in. So I'm starting to lecture now, but I will leave it to, but I understand your question, but there's basically no real answer to it, other than look into history, what happened there.
Brenda.
Yeah, and I think that it's an ongoing debate, and we hear this all the time. And I think there are many pathways, and I think there's no right answer. It's just, you know, if you want a pharmaceutical drug out there, there's a pathway established of what you have to do and isolate molecules. And if you look at the approved market-authorized drugs, it's all dealing with molecules. But if you want a medical pathway, that's there too. And I don't think there's a wrong answer. It's just where your focus is and the approach that you want to take.
I think maybe some of the challenge, though, is that we see is that the scientific approach or the pharmaceutical approach tends to overshadow because there's more money, you know what I mean? So it tends to overshadow, and they try to push the plant magic out of the way. Well, this is the tension that built.
One of the reasons we did the study that we just released yesterday, to answer your question, sir, is that we believe that broad spectrum is critically important, and we believe there's a larger market for non-THC products. All of our products actually don't contain any THC, but they do have CBG and CBN and CBC and CBD and terpenes. And what we were able to show was that a CBD isolated molecule without the additional plant components was not as effective. It still worked, but it wasn't as effective. So I actually take a counterpoint that I actually don't think the focus on the molecule by itself is the right path, as I think you're trying to articulate. But it is, unfortunately, a path that can be understood. And Brinder, I think, would agree with me that if once you can understand a thing, you can regulate a thing better, and therefore you can make it go forward. But that isn't necessarily right.
Question up here.
Thank you. I want to follow up on the earlier questions and your great panel. In this question, belief versus proof, as cannabis puts itself as a traditional medicine, but also very modern medical product, what modern techniques are there to solve your problem of proving out the efficacy that traditional medical trials can't do, and maybe more complicated modern data analytics might be? So what techniques would you see in the future?
The specific technique that we use with a company called Zentrella, and I encourage you to look them up, is they used an AI-based algorithm that was analyzing EEG data. So we actually put an EEG on people's heads, have them consume the product, and then compare the results between their pre-consumption state, their post-consumption state, and the states that they achieve between the two products over 2 different sessions. And so that's a good example of taking new technology that's non-invasive, and that can be observed. It can be done fairly quickly. It can be done with some economic viability, and is a good use of artificial intelligence. And I know we had a great AI chat just before this, but gentlemen, what else are you seeing done as far as modern techniques to resolve that question?
I think we're looking at the efficiency, how you could do clinical processes more efficient, because right now you're looking at $1 billion in 10 years. To do a full trial, but how you can do your in vivo, in vitro, and look at some of those signals there. If you're not getting a thing, cut your losses and move on. Some of the innovative ways that you can do that, work with CROs, working with IQVIA, and how we can do these more efficiently to move ahead. But I think the key thing for us is that if you're not getting the signals earlier, you got to go find a new direction and move on, and then don't flog a dead horse.
The other thing I've seen that I think works well is joining together. Cooperatives that have an outcome that benefits everyone. You're seeing that a little bit with the novel foods groups. The novel foods people are getting together to say, you want this data? Well, let's all get the data. It's going to be the same data, and then get the regulator to try to approve that, but share the cost divided by 30 instead of divided by 1. That's maybe not that innovative an idea, but in a very highly competitive environment, I think it's rare.
That's a good point. More questions?
Feels like the show. All right, we're on time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let's hear it again. Well done.